Good afternoon, dear friends. Today we will do without my swollen face. This class was sick about us, Jalal al-Din and the Mongol conquest of Iran and beyond the Caucasus. I was surprised to find that Zen was desired by these national heroes, and to states at once. For example, and Uzbekistan. In Uzbekistan, there is a monument to him in Urgench. This is not the Urgench Tamerlane, who was taken by the Mongols, then destroyed it. Rather, it should be called Gurgenwolf City, but it is destroyed. A new city has already been built nearby. There is such a beautiful monument in it. It is quite interesting that in Uzbekistan, there are many monuments, and Edi and Meru Timur are national heroes. Although one of them was a fighter against the Mongols, and the other is probably the most outstanding Mongolian commander, who Genghis Khan perfected his tactics and well. That's how it happens. The fact is that national identity requires mythology, and each nation creates such a mythology. This is not a condemnation, it is just a statement of facts. Moreover, it is very important for a historian to separate the mythology that was created with contemporaries, of events that inspired people and moved them to different feats. You know how an idea that has captured the masses becomes invincible. And there is a mythology that is then created after many, many decades and even centuries. The first is an absolute part of history and is studied from the point of view of history. But the second mythology is politics, an attempt to interpret events from the past. These events to justify the existing state of affairs. For example, in such mythology, in the post-Soviet space a dime a dozen from the Ukraine and Central Asia here too, and again, there is no condemnation to do it. All nations have passed through this stage. I do not remember his time as a student was surprised to find that when Ivan Grozny, when he formed a national identity of the Moscow Kingdom, there is happening. There are the legends embarked on a course that Ivan the Terrible is neither more nor less as a descendant of the illustrious seed of Caesar Augustus, and so on. Moscow the Third Rome. So just imagine that, Mark. What is the national mythology? And we can unintentionally hurt her, accidentally in general principle and also consciously. I don't can policy overturned in the past. My videos is a popular scientific nature. And I'm trying to tell you from the point of view of historical science as it looks. I just put spit on all of this national mythology of any nation, and that's such a compassionate and yes, here such here emotion appears in the words. It is wrong. A scientist should be emotional without anger and partiality to be judged on. It does not happen. I really don't like this thing is short enough. Project mythology, just we go doing things. I know. I can't resist just body lady to find. The muzzle is one of the Mongol Balas tribe, which was created for the second time. Color Mongolian half of the Thai state and emptied another palm. A recent Horus Shack, who fought with the Mongols. That's what they have in common. Can only be mythology is no logic. You know there's always confused, but one thing in common. As it would seem on the surface, is both. The other is the warriors of Islam. So that one served their Michis law, another Michis law. As soon as you start to understand one sword of Islam, I will tell what he has done. When the Caliph of Baghdad and all the Muslim states united, and the other sword and Islam fought exclusively with the Muslim government of a great state, defeated all of them and some, so then they are no longer able to recover. But in general, such specific swords Islam, food is called. God deliver us from such counsels, such friends and enemies, that we without them they're so wanted. Denning rapid, or as speak Uzbek Minkberdi. He was the son of Khorezmshah Muhammad Ala ad-Din and Turkmen concubines, and Chichek itself in itself is the basis for Turkmens to talk about our Turkmens and Uzbeks number. But what about Uzbek Turkmen? More like here seriously condemned, because Turkmens in those days were more or less similar to the current form. Already ethnogenesis occurred there long ago and far enough. And that's what for the Uzbeks, well, Today is all a figment of Soviet power, the national state delimitation in Central Asia. After the revolution, those who were earlier nomadic Uzbeks, they came only in the 16th century with Shaybani Khan, and accordingly, there is a big question about what they have to do with Zolidin. But I'll tell you what the fact is, that the dynasty that she spent in Khwarezm came from the Oghuz Turks. These tribes were the ancestors of both nomadic Uzbeks and nomadic Kazakhs, and in general, many modern and, yes, by the way, the Ottoman Turks too. Because the Seljuks also came from there, in general, they are not direct relatives. He has every right to believe that there lived an icy Uzbek, because he was a Shu on his father's side, and his grandmother was Turkic, as I would say. Tarkan Khatun, the ruler of all the women of the world, as she proudly called herself. But his mother, he had the same Turkmen to, and therefore the son of two peoples is always an advantage for the lady's business. But it turned out to be a big problem, because the grandmother was domineering, who had tremendous influence in the Khwarezmsha state. As they say, she drowned for. How many there were, the numbers are arbitrary, as the sources indicate. The ratio is important numbers, they are absolutely the evening. And then 30,000 army steppes Hutukok met with 60,000 army Afghan. Turkmen wanted Din to the battle for Rania business, put their troops in a narrow valley between two steep mountain ranges, and his warriors gathered on the rocks. They have also begun to fire the Mongols, who rushed into a frontal attack. As to maneuver the Mongols, was nowhere to surround them. Did Din Kudai spinning his famous mill around his army, tire showering arrows endless. Neither could they carried large losses, and the first day of the battle did not give any advantage to any of the parties. The next morning steppes Ehud understand that in the general case something pretty bad, that the enemy is much more in order to cram the horses to plant stuffed mucus, to cook from blankets their iskos in all sorts of different bags, are here figures of people to put, all of them 2 barrels of horses that resemble each mangusta minutes, at least 3 of 3 horse, should to be on one go in the other carries the prey, and it will show all the third is a war horse. That put so to horse, and it turned out that there are an army twice, and became in Gaza. Turkmen wished Din was afraid that might reinforcements came, wanted to flee, but he was called as a feeling of thirst loot, and fame has reminded that behind them wives and children that ravaged the Mongol charisma. Now you want to, they destroyed your city, but in short the word found, and the soldiers went into battle, and we wanted. Din showed tactical ingenuity, understand that in these rocky gorges is very difficult wage war horse. He had on the first day of the battle dismounting his men to tie the reasons for it to the back of his belt, and fight on foot shot from a bow well. Plus here they rock climbed, respectively, will be held in such a shootout in which the Mongols suffered heavy losses. And the second day ended the same. The Mongols again attacked. Here in general was all hard, and who knows what would all ended, but the decisive moment. Wanted one himself quit the battle, and ordered his soldiers, sitting astride fresh horses, seeing at the grill in the horses, they are tired the second day. They fight already overgrown without water, but these Afghan and Turkmen in the fresh horses they attacked the Mongols, who absolutely did not expect. And the steppes the Ehud suffered a heavy defeat. The army was defeated, half their fighters lost it. It was smashing it. It was the first and biggest defeat Genghis Khan in Central Asia. But as usual after such great victories, in the army of the winners, made up of heterogeneous elements, began to argue about who won more prey, who is more merit in battle. Got Timur Milik there quarreled with one Afghan commander of another Afghan, confronted Turkmen commander in general. Someone out there Onya took someone precious weapons, and the two halves of the army wanted. Din fought each other. Well, that is not in arms. But the commander of an Afghan, who brought half the troops to cowards, taught Saif ad-Din was his name. He said he would not submit to so unjust. The Turks are gone. and Afghan land, and Wishdin was left with half the army, and against it was already Genghis Khan as the main forces, because he appreciated his defeat very seriously and gathered together all who could. With a large force marched against doing business, drove him to the Indus River. And there the second battle is very large, and also defeated. The fight was difficult because Turkmen Gulam outlived Lady, which have already been in combat. And combatants, they were professional and able grace Turkmen. How the soldiers were in no way inferior to the Mongols, if I said that even surpassed past horses, before they were better against the Akultik is a little who would have won college. Here's a Mongol, here you Akultik compare, so yes. Mongol horses was hardy, push tick is much faster, and generally a martial lie or real is the best in all of Asia. In short, the first attack of the Mongols was reflected them, and wanted Din rushed to the attack to build its axis to crescent but the ends of the ends down to the shores of the Indus River. To get around and counterattack, it almost broke the Mongol army because their principal melee was much weaker than most of their opponents. But Genghis Khan and ahead of time sent an elite squad of soldiers around the mountain, locked the general field of battle, and in the decisive moment they appeared on the flank of the Turkic troops. Jalal single struck a blow which broke the order of battle, wanted Sioux, and the wings of his troops were engaged. After which the center was surrounded by, knowing that his deeds are bad, Sputazir. To get most of his soldiers killed himself, he jumped off the cliff into the river, and the harem it got together with children of Genghis Khan, who ordered the execution of his son 7, saying that the descendants of these brave Muslims will cut my grandchildren. Wanted one prize float in out from the other side, threatened Genghis Khan, usable, well rode well, in fact alone. The way he was defeated. Principle about this I told, but the story took the ladies only the beginning, because he fled to the internet. No, Genghis Khan did not go, it was hot, and the Mongols did not like to fight in the heat, especially Kai. The hatred of the commander of the vanguard of Georgian troops, brothers Shalva and Ivan, is relay brave knight who stood in the front ranks of the army. And when Kharazm attacked, there is gone, so the fight went, the arrows flew so like falling meteors or flying snowflakes, wafting Muslim mixed with kafir, they inflicted each other blows to the extremities, to the heart and neck, wrote an eyewitness of the battles of the Muslim chronicler during the attack. The regiment advanced escort, and the Georgian tops revealed in all its ugly glory. In quotes, brothers plate routed the left-wing troops. Jalal single hit his troops, ousting them from the mountain on which stood the Georgian army. Down the valley they needed assistance. Baden pressure can be Bath would have won the Battle of Nemo, but its haggard hall despised desperate calls. Brothers tore or helped them in attack, and Jalali Din deploying cavalry standing in the center of hit them from all sides, and the regiment was surrounded undefeated. Shalva was captured and was killed when Otobek in Nemo Hogarth potions. Still Georgian troops saw this terrible battle and stood by the defeat of the Georgian army. The penetration has not led to tragic consequences, there seems, no matter how so many were killed. Oshi, his personal secretary, was desired length, which left the story it tells for 1,000 shipped killed. But again, you understand, for 1,000 type that made the marvelous, that is the teeth. And the Jedi killed more, of course, but this is Voska feudal class, that is, if you killed the knight, the knight will appear not earlier than his son, the young will grow to learn and will replace your father. There could not have been, because of the Mongols or Peter I recruitment to hold under the gun to deliver universal military obligation. Part the population of men to send him. This could not be. Here is to see Georgian she has son. But it is clear that the young knights participated in the wars of the what. If someone lived to old age, he had become an advisor to the prince. But they're not concerned if you're killed. You have left an infant son until he grows up. Combat unit lost, it's impossible to replace, because this unit is fed with a certain feudal land allotment. You may not transfer this plot another person, that he's still fighting while this will grow dry, and the other where they're the interests they have their own children. And so on. So when Genghis IV gutted Georgia, Alyosha greatly thinned out the number of Georgian chivalry which could go into battle, and the Battle of Garni of course came. After all, less than Georgian knights versus Genghis, yeah. And actually sources show quite clearly Kosminski Tower was less charisma of someone. So they stood highlands, stood in the defense, did one long cause them to slaughter when they came to bat in the end, ready down and attacked them up in the forehead. And that's when it all started. Catabasia, well, because of the betrayal, Mahagazelle was all over. Was uploaded a disaster after the victory of Garnet's wanted. Dean continued non-stop offensive in Georgia, and in March of 1226 stormed they fort. And after fierce battles, in which was said to have killed hundreds of thousands of Georgians. Have the figure is absolutely unreal. She just exaggerated the scale, shows how much was the human race, fought a lot and was a big city and massacre. There was a terrible. Survivors were invited to accept Islam. Those who refused to do so were killed on the spot and then killed, and those who converted to Islam, because to do said that they're all liars in general. It was interesting to rob the thing that Turkmen and Kipchak troops who had brought with him from the average Asia, then those who would vandalize the Middle East under the conditional name Khwarezm. They had already turned into such displaced condottieri mercenaries, soldiers. Good luck. And they were only interested in looting, and Jalal I was their leader. He had to satisfy their fighters, therefore taking the Belis, defeated him, robbed, destroyed, then went on. And the end of 226 year began the siege of cities, and Kars of the city is the largest city of Armenia, already poised to capture the entire Georgia. Jalal was forced to suspend the company since it was unexpected for him as well. So unexpectedly, in the winter snowed. Yes, expects beat Dinordio appeared in the east. The Mongols, well, actually it even the Mongols, so some Mongolian henchmen south province Kirmonth, which escaped the depredations during the Mongol invasion in 1920 to flourished in peace and harmony under the management of Beams Hajibo the vicar. From Wisht, secretly hate Wishdeen was evident for something that we faced again and again. Styx hijacked, like many of his satraps, warned the Mongols of the miraculous resurrection of the enemy of Genghis Khan and declared their independence. Jalal tried, mind-trapped and forced to surrender. But the Beams knew all the cunning plans of the antics of the former owner, or succumbed to the entreaties, forced to accept the loss for a while. Herman and his independence was willing. Affairs took a more difficult problem, this loss of Isfahan, because this city he gave his younger to his brother, or perhaps his half-brother, and I with one hero in battle with her, and he took and also cheated on him. That was the Jalal of one ruler that the Khwarezmians, as Ibn al-Azhar said, made Din a bad ruler, and his methods of government were abominable. However, his end was even more miserable and sad. Jalal-ed-Din's greatest mistake was making many enemies. 1230, he was ready to cut the throat of not only the Christian Georgians and Armenian and Mongol pagans and heretics assassins, but also believers Muslims, the Caliph in Baghdad, the Sultan and the Rum and Damascus and UBBC and Seljuks Turkey. He was lying to listen to anyone's advice, cursed vision, as something that suggested apply Fabian cow tactics against Russian Sultan. They just flock sheep, said he is dismissive of Leo will stop the sizes of a flock of sheep. The same visit foolishly decided that the Jalali one was lost in the turmoil of the siege of coverage, and when not acted news quite a long time thought that now he can dispose of the treasury and harem master at their discretion. Jalal, returning from the capture of Vizier's throne in the dungeon, where he died meanwhile, wanted Dim catastrophically lost the authority of the army, especially after scandalous public with his homosexual love for the eunuch named Kilik. When the object of his adoration died, Jelly almost went crazy, shocking. Feeling disgust surrounding Muslims For weeks he would not let the tubes, and not be allowed to bury him, and offered to the dead food and drink. And measures, losing patience, whispered among themselves, knowing that he lost his mind. So Ibn al-Asa had every reason to say that Jalal ad-Din was bad, the ruler, and the methods of his reign was disgusting. It was a foregone conclusion. After as his army was defeated at the order of Jin and the East Mongolian troops Charmage, for a short period selected at Fly, Gil to Ray, Isfahan and other Iranian cities, Jalal was surrounded. He went to Baghdad from Khalifa with a plea for help and the union of exposing himself as a defender of Islam. But no one believed him and his call to close around it as a stronghold the resistance of the Mongols caused in the Baghdad Caliph Shumsky and Ayyubid Sultan of Syria. Contemptuous smile, and then began the hunt for Jalal Mosque, which a single spent also persistently and purposefully as GPS running hunted for his father Muhammad Ola uniform. A few years earlier through the valley of the Mughon, I went to Diyarbakir early, with the inevitable loss of life of the melting Khwarezmshahi army. The Mongols captured Mogu in Azerbaijan, crushed the forces of Jalal ad-Din of Amidi near Diyarbakir, successively captured the cities of Mitan Formordin, Karabis Sinjarbit Fox Robe, and Shah Mogu himself wintered at Wuland, but Thermogunner was very annoyed that he did not unable to catch Dishol-i-Din. He sent a test army of local soldiers from Mongol allies to pursue him again, and he defiantly retreated from Tabriz, taking detours ostensibly in search of Jalal. The brainless Khwarezmshahi decided that he could retreat. Just as he had done in 1223, the Mongols returned and attacked the drunken village at midnight. On the very first day, when Jalal was completely drunk alone, his general Orhan managed with great difficulty to rouse him and convey the idea of a deadly threat. He wanted to beg him to give him time to escape. Orhan did this by raising up the standard. He wanted to signal to the Mongols that the Sultan preparing to take the fight, to assure themselves of honor and glory by dying in battle. The people of Charmo were sure that they were not in a hurry to be in their hands, and Orhan and a small detachment of horsemen jumped out of the trap. The Mongols chased him into a corner, and realizing that they had been deceived, they hacked everyone to shreds in rage. But Jalal ad-Din left to live. It wasn't long before he escaped. He separated from the escorts, was lost in the Kurdish mountains. Was the night high above the passes in the snow, it was cold, was to light the fire, and spark to it looked. Local Kurds do not recognize what they Khwarezmshahi was, tempted by his expensive robe and a sumptuous, and killed him, and themselves went to the Amid to sell the captured prey. Is here that they and tied, accusing the fact that they traded the belt and the robe of Khwarezm, but for him it was no longer values. His life ended ignominiously, in essence, a heroic enemy number one of Genghis Khan and fighter against the Mongol. The Mongols invented it. He fought, not struggled, of course, but he fought not so much with the Mongols, as you can see, and he mainly fought against the local rulers of the Middle East, which otherwise, these same troops which killed Wishdin would have fought with the Mongols. He defeated Georgia, defeated the army, fought against the slave of Sultan of Damascus, with the rulers of Kurdistan, with the rulers of Baghdad. In fact, he was a battering ram that opened the gate Mongolian promotion in Iran, the Caucasus, and the Middle East for the invasion of the Khwarezmian people lived in years. Din opened the gates to the Mongols, to the Baghdad here now, and my mum, and well, some sword Islam adventurer and glory cruel. The conqueror is not a very smart ruler. And then the whole homosexuality. Listen to imagine what modern Iran or in Iraq any ruler. So here you are about to do here immediately. Devour Muslims. It's the same in Europe, decomposed to roll in the altars Christian churches, and to build the